Peter's postage stamp is a fun way to decorate for Easter. This is one of my finished samples. He has a little sanded look to give him kind of a vintage feel. We're gonna paint one up together. So I'm gonna start with my background. I am going to use the baby wipe method on this. I just have a wet baby wipe and some of my light brown paint. I'm gonna get a little bit and I am going to simply faux stain this by rubbing on some paint. This is a method that I use a lot. I like to see the wood grain show. I think it's a great opportunity for some character. I'm going almost the whole way out to the edge, but our frame is going to cover that, so I don't need to worry about if I miss a little bit. Now, when I get up here to my engraving, I'm simply going to take this without a glob of paint, and I'm kind of going just quickly back and forth. I want to make sure that I don't have any big blobs of paint when I do that, and just kind of continue to blend this in. This one that I'm doing for myself has quite a bit of character in the wood, which I like. And you want to keep blending it. If it feels like it's dry, turn your baby wipe to a clean spot. You'll get some new moisture, and that will help you to continue on with your faux staining. Okay. He does cover quite a bit of the bottom and the middle, but I want to make sure that I get almost all the way over to my edges. So, and if some of the wood does show through, that's perfectly fine with me. Now, there are some options in your kit. You also have white. You could grab a little bit of that white and add it in different places. Again, find a wet spot on your baby wipe or get a clean baby wipe or a wet paper towel and continue to play with that so you have the look that you want. Doesn't have to look like mine. You may or may not like to see as much wood grain. And I'm about done. I like that. It looks maybe a little more streaky on camera than it does in person. I'm also gonna take, if you've watched me before, you know that I like to add some splatter, speckling. In the shop, we use old toothbrushes, not in your mouth toothbrushes, but toothbrushes that have been well used in paint. And we also use sometimes stiff paintbrushes. Just a little bit of wet, a little bit of water, dip it in some paint and flick it on there. So I much like that background. So we'll let that dry. I previously painted this frame just to save us some time. As always, we like that up and down motion. I just use the side of my foam brush with my finger in an up and down motion, not painting back and forth, but up and down. You could use one of the sponges, round sponges, or makeup wedge. I'm gonna also use my dirty little towel that I had my cocoa paint on, and I'm going to kind of just grunge up this frame a little bit just by taking tiny little bits of cocoa and rubbing it on there. You don't have to do that. You can let it white. You can also sand it to see some of the wood come through. Lots of different options for playing around with your pieces. I like this idea. It kind of gives it that vintage feel. Like poor postage stamp has been around to a few post offices before it made it to its final destination. So again, I'm just taking that baby wipe that I used to stain with my brown, and I'm just rubbing it on my stamp. I can, again, find a clean spot and remove some if I feel like I got too much brown, but just play around with it the way that you would like it. So, okay, that will get glued onto our stamp here shortly. I did paint his bib overalls, and in the original sample, I'll show you that again, I did sand it. I wish I didn't have a shadow from my overhead light, but you can see how I sanded it. I don't have to do that. I can leave it a little brighter. We are just simply going to glue his pocket onto his pants. We're gonna, oops. I don't have enough glue there. I'm always cautious with my super glue. Less is more. I don't want it on me. So I'm gonna put a drop right here in the middle. And I'm going to add a button. Okay, we'll let that dry. And for Peter, I also did paint a head just to save some time, his bottom and his head. He has just a coat of white on there. Again, the up and down motion, I much prefer that method. We are going to add a face for him. In your kit, you will have a stencil. I didn't happen to have a brand new one here, but these are pretty forgiving. So you can just peel it right off and add it on to your bunny. I'm going to take a circle sponge dauber and a little bit of black paint. You can do this with the foam brush. Just make sure your paint is not drippy and that your brush was not wet. I'm just up and down over top of that stencil. You should be fine with your stencil. I've probably used this one a couple times, so they're pretty forgiving. I'm gonna just, you can wait till it's dry if you want to. I'm gonna pull him off right now. Okay, I have a little bit of bleed through there. I'll wait till that's dry and I'll take my pin and clean that up a little bit. Happens, probably because I've used that one a few times. And I'm going to glue my pants onto my body. A few drops of super glue, that's all you need. You do not need to draw big lines of super glue because you don't want it to squeeze out and dry shiny. Okay, so we'll set that aside to dry. And I'm going to bring back my background. Again, I'm going to super glue, super glue my frame on here. I'm just putting dots the whole way around. In your kit, you get a tube. You have to pierce the end of it. It's not quite as user-friendly as these larger bottles, but you could use white glue. If you use white glue for this part, you would need to put some kind of weight on it and give it some time to dry. You want to kind of eyeball this, make sure that it is in the right place before you press it down. I find super glue sticks immediately when you put it in the wrong spot. But we'll get this where it's supposed to be. I'm gonna let that dry for a sec. And bring over his ears. I'm going to take a little bit of white and a little bit of pink, and I'm going to mix those up when we mix paint, you always want to, a little bit more white here. You always want to mix your darker color into your lighter color. So I'm gonna take just a tiny little bit of pink and I'm going to mix it into my white. If I did it the opposite way, I would need way, way too much white in order to ever lighten up that bright pink. So there we go. I can do this in my up and down motion. Oh, I kind of like that. It's got some of the darker pink shading going on there. Or I can, again, use my baby wipe and sort of do that faux staining. Now I'm getting two different colors because I had some brighter pink on my brush, but that is fine. I'm gonna get this on here and go back over to the other one. I kind of like the variegation that we're getting. Maybe I need a little tiny bit of the darker on this one. I could certainly sand these when they're dry if I wanted to. That will lighten them up as well. But I didn't sand his pants on this one, so it is going to be a little bit brighter than my original sample, which is fine. Okay, so let me bring my background back over here. I am going to take some glue for his, actually I'm going to lay it all here on to get started. There, you can see the difference in the body of the bunny versus the frame because I darkened this up a little bit. Helps our bunny to stand out some. And let me show you. I do have a little tiny bit of bleed through there on his one whisker. And if that happens at home, I'm kind of glad it happened here because then I can show you. I'm just taking a vinyl picker. You could do the same thing with a straight pin. And I'm just gonna clean that up a little bit. You could touch it back up with some white paint if you want. Always a teachable moment, right? Okay. And that is going to get glued here. You can sort of decide. You can tilt his head a little bit. If you do that, you need to bump it over so that his body is farther over on your stamp. Or we can turn his head a little bit like so and center him more. This guy in my original one, he is off to the side. So I kind of like that look. That's how I'm gonna do this one as well. So I think I'll bump him over just a little bit. He's gonna get glued right there. These guys will get glued right here. And I think I do wanna make those a little paler, so I might play around with that. And then one of the last things that you're gonna need to do is give him some eyeballs. You could use the end of an artist brush. I have a broken toothpick here right now. I'm just going to give him 2 dots for his eyeballs. I need to add a little more to that guy. All right, and then we will let that dry because that will need some dry time so that we don't smear that bump up of paint. Last thing that you would do then, after that's all glued together, is to go ahead and put your sawtooth hanger on the top. You want to be very careful that you add that sawtooth hanger where your 2 thicknesses are so that your nails don't come through the front section of where it's only a single piece of wood. So it needs to go at the top so that your nails are safe. Okay. So there's my original sample. He's a little paler and sanded. My sample from today, a little bit brighter. I think I will tone those ears down a little bit. You can take some paint and add additional flecking over him. You can add more to his ears, play around with him, but I think he is super cute. Thanks, guys.